So the Indian Scout Bobber is part of the 2025 Indian Scout range, and it's a great looking bike, but it breaks one very important rule of motorcycling. Hey everyone, welcome to Roads of Oz. My name is Matt, and on this episode we're looking at the 2025 Indian Scout Bobber. Now the Indian Scout has been available for around a decade, but in the 2025 range has had a major update with the frame and more powerful motor. From the Scout 1130cc range, the Scout Bobber 2020 and the Scout Rogue have been dropped. The Scout is now the Scout Classic, and the Scout Bobber has been retained. While filming this video, you could still see the 1133cc range on the Indian website. This probably means there's still some stock available, and if you like a bargain, you might be able to go to the dealer and do a deal on some run-out stock, saving yourself a bit of coin in the process. Now the 2025 range has the Scout 60 Bobber, which is a smaller capacity stripped back Indian Scout. That's the cheapest in the range. And it's a good $2,500 less than the nearest price Scout in the range. Joining the lineup is the Sport Scout, the Super Scout, the range topping 101 Scout, and they all come with a 2-year unlimited kilometre warranty. The bike I test rode, the Scout Bobber, is the one I'm going to be talking about here. Now here in Australia, the recommended retail price for the Bobber starts at $22,995. This gives you a Bobber in black metallic with a standard trim. The standard trim is an analog gauge, old school keyed ignition, and a fuel level gauge. Even in standard trim, you still get an LED headlight and ABS. But me personally, I'd be opting for the Scout Bobber Limited Plus Tech Package. The extra $2,000 gives you a whole range of features, including a better color range of black smoke, sunset red smoke, and my favourite, Nara Bronze Metallic. The additional tech package has a 4-inch touchscreen powered by Ride Command. Now it features a real-time clock, air temperature, and a whole heap of other features, which I'll cover a bit later. You also get keyless ignition. That's right, no more fumbling in your pocket looking for your keys after you put your gloves on. Indian have really worked on their appearance of this bike. The earlier models, although looking fine, had the radiator sticking out and it stuck out like a sore thumb. The newer ones have been reduced in size. The sleeker radiator looks more integrated and some would say better than its predecessor. The headlight bezel looks good and appears better integrated than a lot of other bezels I've seen on other Bobber motorcycles out there. I'm not really a fan of matte colours on cars, but on motorcycles they seem to work. The sunset red smoke and the low sleek look gives the bike a great look. Added with a blacked out engine, I could not fault the looks on this bike. The Ride Command touch screen not only has every imaginable info available to you, there's also bound to be a display option that will suit you. You can pair up your phone quite easily and navigate your phone list via the display, so you do not need to mount the phone to the bike. Now, some of us don't want to be disturbed or connected either, and what the Ride Command system has over a lot of other manufacturers is you don't need the phone connected. It's not reliant on an app to use the navigation system. Brilliant. A USB-A outlet hidden neatly under the tank if you need to charge your phone or other devices. Now, Indian has quite cleverly given many options for the Scout range. You can pretty much option up your Scout to meet your needs and riding style. Being able to option up the Scout Bobber or Sport, you can see why they're able to remove the Rogue and Bobber 20 from their range. Well, at the start of the video, I said that the bike broke a very important rule. That is, at times the bike made me feel old. Let's face it, the Scout is a bike that is aimed at younger people, and the first 2 hours on the bike, it made this pretty clear. After riding through town and being stuck at lower speeds on the highway, I started to get uncomfortable on the bike. I was actually relieved to be getting off it and having a break at a service centre. The forward pegs and forward reach on the handlebars did contribute to this, but it also may have been that prior to riding this bike, I was on Indian's Roadmaster, and that thing's a luxury flagship tourer of the Indian range. Getting back and riding the bike after my break, I no longer had those issues. It may have also been just a case of getting used to the Bobber's riding position. Also, the sat-nav can be hard to read and operate. I made a few wrong turns, misreading the directions. Again, I'll put that down to my age. The reality is, if you can use a mobile phone app without issues, then this screen will be no problem for you. Now, the suspension on the other hand, it struggled, and I'll proportion it to a 30-70 split of 30% bike and 70% our disgusting, terrible Australian roads. The rear shock has 51mm of travel and finds its limits very quickly on our potholed and bumpy roads. Indian do have an aftermarket Fox shocks for the Scout as an option, and if they are anything like the Fox shocks on the Sport Chief, they'll transform the ride and the quality dramatically, and that would be the first upgrade I'd be carrying out on the bike. Now, the bobber has next to no luggage carrying ability. You can spec it up to have panniers, but in my opinion, it will just take away from that sleek look that the bobber has. Those that are buying the bobber probably aren't looking at it as a daily rider duties or with touring in mind when opting for this type of Scout. Let's start with the ergonomics of the bike. Now, I'm 6'4", which is about 193 centimeters for the metric folk out there. Now, even though this is a sleek, low bike, I fit on it fine. Now, that is due to the forward controls and the low handlebars. Getting on and off the bike can be done without needing some sort of yoga training, thanks to the Scout bobber's 665mm seat height. Now, the bobber does suffer from mullet hair syndrome. Now, I don't mean that you'll look back on this bike one day and think, what the hell was I thinking? Much like a lot of us did in the 80s and 90s, but oh my God, how good would it be to have hair again? Memories. What I mean is, with the bobber, much like the mullet, there are two things going on. The mullet had business at the front and putty at the back going on, where the bobber has, from the waist up, you're leaning forward like you would be on a sports bike or a road bike, yet from the waist down, your legs are forward like they would be on a cruiser. Now, this is great for my height. Probably not so great if you're a touch on the shorter side. And also the ride position is different to what most of us are used to. And like I said earlier, it took me a couple of hours to get used to that position. Now, Indian have you covered. They offer as an option higher handlebars for if you really need to be sitting more of an upright position, and also mid controls, which will help bring your feet back. The engine's great, by the way. Its predecessor had a 97 Newton meter motor, where the new models are a 1250cc liquid cooled engine producing 105 horsepower with 108 Newton meters of torque. The engine's revvy compared to its bigger air-cooled siblings and is fun to wind out when you're giving it some throttle therapy. I had an absolute ball on this bike, throwing this bike through some of the bends when heading along the Great Ocean Road and also heading along back roads going back into Melbourne. One other thing, the bike is also 6 kilograms lighter than its predecessor. Now, even though the brakes are a single 298mm semi-floating disc with two pistons up front and a single piston at the rear, which are standard across the range, except for the Scout 101, after thorough testing, I found they worked fine. I was pleasantly surprised by the bike's handling, and I was initially skeptical of how it would handle with that chunky front tyre. Standard, they come with Pirelli MT60 RSs. They're a 16-inch front and rear tyre, and at no stage did they become unsettled, and handled everything from heavy braking to some fun in the twisties. Around town, this bike shines. Lane filtering is quite easy. Now, the bike's 246 kilos, although on paper it's a touch heavy, it's still easy enough to manoeuvre, especially when backing it into a parking spot. Although highway use is not the ideal element for this bike, thanks to cruise control, fatigue can be managed or reduced. Now, the tank capacity has been lifted from 12.5 litres to 13 litres. This should give you a range of about 230 kilometres. On the upside, this too will help reduce fatigue because you'll need to have regular stops filling up. So plan your bigger trips to avoid range anxiety. The Scout has 3 riding modes, standard, sport and tour, but I just left it in sport mode the whole time I had it. So should you get one? Well, even though the bobber is aimed at younger riders, it could make a strong contender for riders coming from sport or road bikes that want a cruiser but don't want a big air-cooled twin. Or maybe a rider that finds the larger twins too heavy to manage. Even if the bobber is not to your personal liking, India have a Scout in their range that could appeal to all types of riders. Chuck in their impressive accessories catalogue and you can pretty much have a Scout specific to your needs. Anyway, that's pretty much it from me. Thanks very much for watching, and check out some of my other bike review videos right here.